Hey guys, tonight we slip into the humid August heat of 1185, stepping through the crowded harbours of Thessaloniki, Byzantium's jewel of the north, second only to Constantinople. You stand on the wharf at dawn, listening to merchants shout prices in Greek, Italian and Arabic, while fishing nets slap against the sides of anchored boats. The air smells of salt, fresh bread, roasting fish, and something uneasy. Rumours drift like smoke, fleets in the west. Normans gathering in Sicily whispers that the empire's borders are softer than they used to be, and as you look toward the glowing horizon, you feel a tremor of warning. You probably won't survive this. Before we sink into the fall of Byzantium's second city, hit like a hammer by Norman ambition, make sure to like the video, subscribe and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is right now in your corner of history, alright? Deep breath. Night owl. Let's follow the story. You trudge through Thessaloniki's waking streets, passing workshops clanging metal, olive presses grinding slowly, priests chanting morning hymns, and aristocrats carried in litters across marble-paved avenues. Everything feels normal, almost too normal. That's the problem. The city shines, wealthy and busy, but Byzantium beyond its walls is cracking. You can feel the tension beneath the rhythm of daily life, like a drum beating from under the floor. The empire isn't what it used to be, not under Emperor Andronikos I Komnenos, a man so paranoid he might jump at his own shadow. His purges, executions and obsession with traitors have left the empire shaky. The aristocracy hates him, the military fears him, and the borders? They're held together with prayers and duct tape. You sense something brewing far away. An army preparing, sharpening knives meant for cities exactly like this one. But for now, Thessaloniki sparkles. Walls stretch tall and strong, 8 kilometres long, the kind of fortifications you'd expect to keep the world out. The markets overflow with figs, wine, silks, ivory and spices. Gold coins clink like raindrops. The churches shine with mosaics of shimmering saints. It feels safe, blessed, protected. And that is precisely why the Normans want it. You wander toward the sea walls, catching the breeze blowing across the Thermaic Gulf. A fisherman beside you mutters, "The Normans took Dyrrhachium years ago. Maybe they'll try again." His companion scoffs. "Let them. The Emperor will send troops." You quietly raise an eyebrow. "Sure he will. Any minute now. Honestly. Really." A small squad of soldiers marches past you, armour dusty, weapons dull. Not from recent battles, but from neglect. Thessaloniki's garrison is thin, underpaid, undertrained, and undersupervised. You know this. The Normans know this. Everyone knows this, except maybe the city's leadership, who is convinced everything is fine. Spoiler, everything is not fine. You cross the Platea, where city officials shout at tax collectors and merchants argue over the fairness of grain shipments. Politics hums through the air like a mosquito. The new governor, David Komnenos, a relative of the emperor, struts around with more confidence than competence. He dismisses warnings, refuses to bolster defences, trusts the emperor's promises of reinforcements that never actually come. If Thessaloniki falls, history will place a large share of the blame squarely at his feet. As you move toward the upper city, children run through alleyways chasing goats, monks carry scrolls between monasteries, and aristocrats dine on balconies overlooking the sea. Life is normal, perfectly normal, and yet, beneath the surface you feel a heartbeat speeding up. Something is coming. The sun climbs higher, the heat thickens, you hear gossip swirling. Norman envoys spotted in the west, ships leaving Sicily, troops gathering in Calabria, messengers from Constantinople intercepted. You pass a group of sailors repairing nets. One leans in close and says quietly, "A trader came from Corfu. He says the Normans are preparing a fleet big enough to blacken the sea." The others laugh nervously, then stop laughing, because jokes are funny until they aren't. At midday you reach the Acropolis, looking out over the vast sweep of the city, church domes rising like islands of light, streets winding like veins through markets and neighbourhoods, the harbour glittering with ships. Thessaloniki looks invincible. But you know better. Cities fall not because walls crumble, but because leaders fail. A distant gull cries overhead. You rub your sweat-damp forehead and think about those rumours. The Normans. hard, restless warriors forged in the chaos of Italy and Sicily. They've beaten Byzantines before. They've tasted victory. They've tasted empire. And they want more. The empire's diplomats say the Normans want nothing. The merchants hope they want trade. The people pray they want peace. But the Normans want Thessaloniki. As afternoon fades, a strange hush settles over the city. Maybe it's only the heat. Maybe it's something deeper. You sense uncertainty curling at the edges of every street. A trader drops a basket of figs. A soldier trips on uneven stone. A group of monks huddle over a scrap of parchment, whispering like frightened birds. You hear bells ring from the church of St. Demetrios, low and long, echoing through marble halls and crowded avenues. They'll ring again when the Normans arrive, but not for prayer. As twilight softens the sky, you walk back toward the harbour. Lanterns flicker on the docks, lighting fishermen, wine sellers, and sailors with anxious eyes. A boy points toward the far horizon and asks his father, "Are the Normans coming?" The father hesitates too long before answering. Yes, but not yet. Not yet, but soon enough to shake the empire. You stand at the water's edge as the sun drops behind the mountains, casting Thessaloniki into gold and quiet. The city breathes in and holds it, because somewhere out there, beyond the curve of the world, sails are rising, oars are dipping, armies are gathering, and Thessaloniki does not know what's about to hit it. You wake the next morning to a strange, restless energy humming through Thessaloniki's streets, the kind of morning where the air feels heavy even before the sun climbs. You rub the sleep from your eyes and step outside to see merchants setting up stalls with half-hearted motions, soldiers shuffling to posts with expression they try to hide, and fishermen whispering nervously as they haul nets that look far too small for a city this large. The rumours haven't faded, they've multiplied overnight. You drift through the lower market, passing bakers shouting prices over the clang of opening shop shutters. One baker swears he heard the Normans took Corfu, another insists they're still in Sicily. Someone else claims they saw a dark line of ships on the horizon before dawn. You know how rumours work. Each one feeds the city's nerves like a spark on dry tinder. A group of dock workers huddle together, one waving his hands dramatically. "I tell you," he says, "they're gathering at Otranto. Big fleet, big army. They want a new Roman Empire and they'll start with us." His friend scoffs, but the laugh sounds thin. "They wouldn't dare attack the second city of the empire." Another worker mutters, "You really think they care what number we are? You keep moving." Passing children chasing each other between pillars, chasing seabirds, chasing whatever joy they can steal before the world turns heavy again. Thessaloniki looks gorgeous in the morning light. Walls rising on the hills like ancient jaws, marble streets shimmering faintly, church bells echoing through the warm breeze, but underneath the beauty lies a crack, thin, hairline, but growing. The empire has problems, and every Thessalonian feels it in their bones. The more you walk, the more you see the signs. At the city gate, a squad of soldiers leans against their shields, wiping sweat from their brows. A few helmets sit at their feet instead of on their heads. One soldier yawns and mutters, "We need reinforcements." Another mutters back, "We need leadership." You don't blame them. The commander, David Komnenos, has been a disaster since he arrived. Too proud to listen, too inexperienced to prepare, too self-assured to worry. He hosts feasts while scouts bring warnings. He rejects advice from veterans. He sends harsh letters to Constantinople, demanding supplies, but ignores basic defensive preparations. You remember overhearing a merchant laugh bitterly last night. David thinks family ties make him talented. I've seen turnips with better instincts. And honestly, the turnip might be winning. You climb toward the upper city as the sun pushes higher. Heat clings to your skin like thick cloth. The houses here belong to the wealthy. Large courtyards, carved doorways, mosaics shimmering beneath your feet. Yet even here, whispers float through open windows. They say the emperor executed another noble. They say the army in Thrace won't move without pay. They say the Normans mean to sack us to the stones. Every voice trembles, because every voice knows Byzantium's power is thinning. You wander along the massive walls overlooking the sea. From up here the view is breathtaking. Blue waters rolling outward, glittering beneath the sun, stretching to the horizon like an endless shield. And yet, you feel exposed. The guards pacing along the battlements don't look reassured either. Their armour is mismatched, their spears dull, their helmets dented. You pass two arguing in hushed tones. "We need to strengthen the gate. We've been saying that for weeks." And the governor does nothing praise, feasts, smiles. One day he'll smile and the walls will fall down from sheer embarrassment. You stifle a laugh, but the truth isn't funny. As midday approaches, a messenger gallops through the market, dust trailing from his horse's hooves. "News from the west," he shouts. "Normans have taken Durazzo. Durazzo has fallen." The street stops cold. Durazzo, Dyrrhachium, the gateway to the Balkans, a city that once held off entire armies, if that has fallen. Thessaloniki is next. The merchant beside you freezes, basket of figs slipping from trembling fingers. "Durazzo," he whispers, "then they're coming here." Fear spreads like spilled wine. Mothers rush to gather children, traders close shutters, sailors prepare to flee, priests begin chanting louder, faster. The city feels suddenly smaller, like walls pressing inward. You hurry toward the palace district. Maybe the governor will act. Maybe reinforcements have arrived. Maybe, just maybe, the empire is awake. You arrive just in time to see David Komnenos dismiss the messenger with a wave of his hand. "Durazzo always falls," he says lightly. "It has fallen before, it will rise again. There's no reason to panic." You stare. Hard. A soldier beside you mutters under his breath, "He'll be telling us this while the Normans are climbing the walls." You want to shout at David, shake him, drag him to the walls and force him to look west. Instead, you follow the crowd as it spills back into the streets. Fear is now everywhere. You wander through neighbourhoods where families pack belongings, not because they plan to flee, but because they've heard stories of sacks, stories of Normans who stormed cities, ripped open granaries, burned churches and left nothing but ashes. A little girl stops you, clutching a doll with one missing eye. "Are the Normans scary?" she asks. You kneel. "They are warriors," you say gently. She swallows hard. "Then we need saints," she whispers, turning toward St. Demetrios's basilica. Evening falls like a slow curtain. Torches light the streets. Soldiers pace faster. Priests chant longer. Citizens pray harder. You step onto the sea walls to look west one last time. The horizon glows faintly red. Not sunset red. Campfire red. Signal fire red. Army red. Your stomach drops. There, far away, but unmistakable, tiny black dots on the water ships. Many ships. The Normans have come. You barely sleep that night. Not because of noise. Thessaloniki is too frightened to make noise. But because the city breathes wrong, every alley seems to exhale anxiety. Every window glows faintly with lamplight from families who cannot rest. And every heartbeat inside these walls feels like a drum counting down to something catastrophic. Dawn breaks pale and sickly over the Thermate Gulf. You climb quickly to the western walls, rubbing the fatigue from your eyes, and when you reach the battlements your breath catches. The Normans are no longer distant shadows. They're here. Hundreds of ships darken the water. Sleek war galleys, lumbering transports, Sicilian dromons with shark's teeth painted on the prows. Their sails catch the early light like enormous wings. Their oars rise and fall in brutal rhythm. The sea itself looks bruised beneath them. A soldier beside you chokes out a half-whisper, half-prayer. Holy Mother! That's not a fleet. That's a plague. He's not wrong. The Normans have come to strike Byzantium at its heart, and Thessaloniki is the doorway they intend to smash off its hinges. You watch as horn signals echo across the water. Ships begin unfurling crimson banners, a bold, taunting declaration. The men on deck shout war cries that carry faintly across the Gulf. Even from here you can feel their confidence, their hunger, their certainty. This is not a probing attack. This is a hammer blow. The city's walls suddenly feel far too thin. By mid-morning, Thessaloniki erupts in chaotic motion. Soldiers run from post to post. Bells ring from the forum. Priests rush through the streets swinging censers, their incense clouds swirling like frantic smoke signals. Citizens pour toward the markets, buying anything edible they can find, even mouldy bread, even stale barley. A shopkeeper yells, "Double price for grain!" A woman shouts back, "Robber!" He retorts, "Robbery is on the sea, not at my stall." You push through the crowd, trying to reach the palace. The city governor must finally be preparing defences, reinforcing the walls, calling the garrison, ready to fight. You reach the palace courtyard just in time to see David Komnenos hosting a meeting. A meeting, not a war council, not an emergency response. A meeting. He's surrounded by advisors offering him wine and figs, while a trembling officer tries to explain the situation. "The fleet numbers over 200 ships," David waves him off. "They're bluffing." Your jaw drops so hard it might hit the marble floor. Another officer tries to press him. "My lord, this is not a bluff. The Normans have landed men south of the harbour," David scoffs. "Bandits. The city walls are strong. The citizens are loyal. The emperor will send help." You want to scream. You want to shake him. You want to drag him to the battlements and force him to look. But instead, he strolls away and says over his shoulder, "There is no danger. Return to your posts." A soldier watching this murmurs, "May St. Demetrios save us because this idiot won't." You agree wholeheartedly. You leave the palace furious, pushing into the streets where panic grows like wildfire. On the lower walls, soldiers gather in clusters, too few, too tired, too uncertain. You hear snippets of argument. "We need archers on the towers." "We have no extra arrows." "Where are the reinforcements?" "Constantinople sent none." "What do we do?" "Pray." A Thracian veteran spits on the ground. "I didn't survive battles against the Serbs just to die because our commander can't read a horizon." Far below, along the shoreline, Norman landing parties begin unfurling ladders, setting up small campfires, sharpening spears with eerie calm. They don't fear the city. They don't even rush. That's how confident they are. The sea breeze carries their chants and laughter up the walls. Thessaloniki quivers. You rush to one of the western towers where a monk prays loudly. Clutching an icon of St. Demetrios, people gather around him. Mothers with children, old men leaning on canes, merchants wringing their hands. "Will God protect us?" someone asks. The monk hesitates, and that hesitation crushes something inside the crowd. By afternoon, the Normans make their move. You watch in horror as ship after ship delivers troops onto the beaches. Thousands of infantry, heavily armoured knights, crossbowmen, siege engineers. They unload carts of tools, pull ropes taut, hammer stakes into sand. They form lines, shield walls, ranks. Like a cold tide, they advance. Thessaloniki's walls creak under the weight of terrified soldiers. A captain shouts, "Archers to the parapet!" But there are too few, and too many of their bows are cracked or old. The first Norman volleys streak upward, arrows hissing through the air, striking shields, walls, even rooftops inside the city. You duck as one bolts inches past your ear and thunks into a stone merlon. Soldiers around you curse, panic, scramble. The Normans cheer. Hours drag by. The sun burns overhead. Sweat stings your eyes. The city is desperately, dangerously unprepared. Every moment reveals another failure of leadership. No boiling oil ready. No water barrels positioned. No reinforcement orders. No reserve units deployed. Byzantium's second largest city is a treasure chest with the lid half open, and the Normans are thieves with iron hands. As late afternoon shadows stretch across the sea, the Norman siege lines fully form, dense, disciplined, bristling with siege ladders and heavy shields. You watch them lay logs for ramps, set up mantlets, and organise assault teams. A soldier beside you whispers, "This is it. They're coming." You nod because you feel it too. The first blow isn't a battering ram or a ladder, it's the sound. A deep rolling roar that shakes the air and sets your teeth vibrating. Thousands of Normans chanting, their voices merging into a single thunderous pulse. "Roma! Roma! Roma!" Not because they love Rome, but because they want to be Rome. Thessaloniki's defenders stiffen. Civilians scream and run. The walls tremble with fear. And slowly, inevitably, the Norman army begins its march toward the gates. The fall has begun. By the time the sun starts to sink behind the hills, Thessaloniki finally admits something it should have understood days ago. This is not a rumour, not a drill, not a diplomatic incident that will vanish with the next messenger. This is a siege. Unfortunately, the city realises it way too late. You stand on the western wall as the Norman lines harden across the plain, like a row of iron teeth biting into the land. Siege ladders lean ready against crude frameworks. Piles of stones, spare shields, and bundles of arrows sit in tidy stacks behind their front ranks. Their camp is a machine. Thessaloniki, on the other hand, looks like someone announced surprise test to a class that hasn't studied all year. A weary officer runs along the parapet shouting, "Check your bowstrings! Prepare stones, bring water for the men!" Behind him, soldiers scramble to obey, but they're working with scraps. A young archer mutters as he strings his bow. This was supposed to be inspection day, not defend the city from total annihilation day. His friend replies, "Welcome to Byzantium. Expectations are a luxury." You glance down at the walls themselves. They're old, strong, impressive, and neglected. Cracked stones, missing mortar sections where vegetation has crept into gaps. Not catastrophic, but not ideal when thousands of Normans are thinking, "That's our front door now." And then there's the garrison. Let's just say it's not exactly peak performance. Too few men, too many gaps, too much confusion, too little leadership. At the northern gate you see a group of soldiers arguing over where to place a ballista. One insists it faces the main Norman camp. Another points out that they have no bolts big enough to use anyway. The third just wants to know when someone's bringing dinner. Spoiler, not soon. Throughout the city the flaws multiply. In a tower overlooking the sea, a group of defenders discover their arrow barrels are nearly empty. "We were supposed to receive more from Constantinople," one says, "but the shipment was delayed." Translation: someone pocketed money, someone got lazy, and now the city will pay in blood. At one of the land gates, you watch engineers hurriedly fill gaps in the stone with timber and sandbags. A master mason shakes his head and mutters, "This is patchwork, not fortification. If they focus here, it won't hold." You ask how long it would have taken to fix it properly. "Months," he replies. "Months we spent arguing about who would pay for it." There it is again. The true enemy is not the Normans, it's Byzantine bureaucracy. In the city centre, the panic feels different. It's not screams and stampedes. It's 1,000 small, sharp decisions made in fear. Merchants pull their goods indoors. Families stack stones behind doors. Priests empty church treasury chests, hiding relics and precious icons. Even the stray dogs look unsettled. Outside St. Demetrius's basilica, a line of people forms, not for food, but for blessing. A priest moves quickly, touching foreheads, making the sign of the cross, murmuring prayers so fast they almost blur together. A soldier kneels in front of the icon of St. Demetrius and whispers, "I know we haven't talked in a while, but now would be a great time to notice us." Can't blame him. Back at the palace, things go from bad to ridiculous. You find David Komnenos finally convening a war council. Good news, right? Kind of. He stands in front of a map of Thessaloniki, pointing dramatically with a metal rod. "We will man the walls and trust in God," he declares. One of the older commanders clears his throat. "My lord, that's not a plan. That's a sentence with verbs." Another officer steps forward, trying again. "We must assign reserves to weak points, reinforce the lower western wall, prepare fire for the gates, and we should send another urgent request to Constantinople." David scoffs. "Constantinople knows our situation. The emperor will not abandon us." You can feel the entire room quietly disagree. Someone mutters under their breath, "He's busy not abandoning himself." One of the more realistic officers suggests a sortie, to hit the Normans before they fully settle, destroy their early siege engines and retreat. David waves it off. "Too risky. The people would panic if they see us fighting outside the walls." The officer stares. "So they'll be less panicked when the Normans are on the walls?" No answer. You leave the hall more worried than when you entered. On the battlements that evening the gaps become glaring. You walk from tower to tower and count. One section has barely a dozen men where there should be 50. Another has archers but no shields. A third has shields but barely any spears. The men do what they can, tying bundles of stones to be rolled down on attackers, filling baskets with sand to smother potential fires, stacking whatever heavy objects they can find. At one point you see a defender positioning barrels of wine near a weak gate. "For fire, you ask?" He grins weakly. "For after, if there is an after." Fair. Down in the lower city, the harbour defences tell another story. Chain booms meant to block hostile ships have rusted or fallen out of use. The garrison there is minimal, trusting in the belief that Normans will attack from land, not sea. because of course invaders always follow your expectations and send you a polite schedule ahead of time. A grizzled sailor leans on a piling and says to no one in particular, "We asked for more patrols months ago." "What did they say?" someone asks. He shrugs. "They said the treasury was tight." He gestures toward the Norman fleet. "It won't be tight after this. It'll be empty." As night falls, the city finally completes the bare minimum defensive measures it should have had ready. Weeks ago, gate bars checked, torches stocked, signal horns distributed, patrol routes assigned. It's something, but it's not enough. From the walls, you watch Norman fires spring up like a constellation on the dark plain. Hundreds of campfires gleaming, men moving like shadows around them. You see silhouettes of ladders, siege towers under construction, carpenters working late by torchlight. They are preparing, properly, methodically. Out here, the Normans are the professionals. Inside, Thessaloniki is improvising. You lean against a crenellation and look out at the enemy. A young soldier beside you grips his spear so tight his knuckles go white. "You've seen sieges before?" he asks quietly. You nod. "Is it always like this?" You think of Rome, of other cities, other walls, some better prepared, some worse. "Sometimes," you answer, "but usually good walls and good leadership scare off an attacker before it comes to this." He swallows. "And we have good walls." You pause. "Yes. And leadership?" You look back toward the palace, where faint music still drifts from an upper window. "We have walls," you repeat gently. He understands. As the hours pass, the city settles into a tense, sleepless vigil. Torches burn low on the battlements. Patrols tramp along the parapets. From the churches, hymns rise like woven threads of sound, stitching a fragile calm over the fear. You can feel the imbalance now, like a scale where all the weight sits on one side. The Normans have numbers, momentum, leadership and preparation. Thessaloniki has faith, stone and habit. And while those last three have kept cities alive before, you know they can't compensate forever for everything the Empire has allowed to rot. So you stand on the wall, staring into the darkness, where Norman shapes gather and silent machines of war wait to roll forward at dawn. The preparations are done, such as they are. The city is as ready as it will ever be, which is not nearly enough. And somewhere beyond the firelight, a Norman commander looks up at Thessaloniki's proud but fragile walls and smiles, because he sees what you see. The cracks are already there. All he has to do is push. You wake to the sound of horns. Not Byzantine horns, the thin, wailing kind used for warnings. These are deeper, heavier, confident. Norman horns. You scramble up the battlements just as the first light bleeds across the horizon, turning the Norman camp into a forest of silhouettes. Shields, lances, raised standards, hundreds of men shifting into formation. The smell of damp earth and sea salt hangs in the air, mixed with the metallic scent of fear. The defenders along the wall grip their weapons tighter. Some whisper prayers. Others stare silently, jaws clenched, as the moment finally arrives. The Normans begin their advance. They don't charge, they approach. Slow, methodical, terrifying. A broad shield wall forms in front, towering kite shields locked together, painted with red crosses and snarling beasts. Behind them, long lines of infantry march in disciplined columns, followed by crossbowmen, then knights on foot clad in iron that glints like a row of dawn-lit teeth. Siege crews wheel wooden frames toward the walls, tall, rigid shapes that look harmless until you remember they're basically ladders designed to deliver death. A Byzantine soldier beside you swallows hard. "They look like they're going to church," he mutters. "Yeah," you reply softly, "church of breaking down our walls." The young soldier forces a shaky laugh, but his eyes stay wide. As the Normans draw closer, David Komnenos finally appears on the battlements. He arrives late, dishevelled, looking like someone dragged him out of bed and told him the city is on fire. Spoiler, it practically is. He surveys the approaching enemy with exaggerated calm. "Hold your ground," he says loudly, as though the command itself is a brilliant military insight. A veteran mutters behind you. Brilliant. Truly inspirational. Next, he'll tell us to breathe. But the soldiers do hold because they have no choice. The Normans stop just outside arrow range. A strange silence settles. Then, a Norman captain steps forward carrying a horn. He raises it to his lips, and the blast that follows shakes dust from the walls. The shield wall marches forward. A wave of crossbow bolts arcs upward like a flock of dark birds. They slam into the parapet with vicious thunks, one burying itself into the wood inches from your arm. You duck instinctively, heart pounding. All along the walls, men cry out. A defender falls back clutching his shoulder. Another grabs his face, blood seeping between his fingers. A third collapses silently, the bolt buried deep in his throat. Panic ripples, but commanders shout, "Hold! Return fire!" Archers step up, but their arrows fall shorter than expected. Some snap, some wobble, some simply miss. Training and equipment levels matter, and Thessaloniki is, let's say, not at peak performance. The Normans keep advancing siege ladders slam against the walls. The impact jolts through stone and bone alike. You lean over the crenellation and see armoured figures climbing upward, shields strapped to arms, swords clenched between teeth. Their movements are sure, practiced, ruthless. A Byzantine defender rolls a stone barrel off the ledge. It smashes into the ladder with a crunch, splintering wood and sending 2 Normans plummeting. The men on the parapet cheer, but the victory lasts seconds, because for every ladder broken, 3 more rise. You grab a spear from a nearby rack and help thrust down at the climbers. A Norman reaches the top, helmet dented, eyes furious. He swings you duck. A soldier next to you blocks the blow and gets knocked backward by a second attacker's shield. Bodies slam together in the tight space. "Push them off," someone yells. You throw your weight into the defender beside you, driving a Norman climber backward. He loses his footing and falls, taking another man down with him, but behind him more keep coming. The wall becomes a storm of metal and screams. Below, the Normans shift tactics. Crossbows reposition, sending deadly volleys at any defender who dares show his head. Siege crews wheel forward a monstrous battering ram shaped like a boar's head, its iron tusks glinting in the morning light. They angle it toward the western gate. "The gate," a soldier shouts. "They're going for the gate." Of course they are. The gate is always the weak point. You sprint along the parapet, weaving between defenders, sliding down a stairwell into the lower corridor. The smell hits before you arrive. Sweat, smoke, fear thick enough to taste. As you emerge onto the gate platform, you see defenders bracing the wooden beams with whatever they could find. Barrels, planks, even furniture dragged from nearby houses. They push desperately, panting as the ram crashes against the outer doors. Boom! 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 Each impact sends a vibration up your legs. Splinters fly. Dust drifts from the rafters. A plank cracks. Men shout. Someone curses loudly enough to make a monk gasp. The gate holds, but barely pour the oil, an officer commands. But there's a problem. The oil isn't ready. You glance over at 2 hapless soldiers wrestling with a clay jar, trying to break it open. Another fumbles with a torch. Someone else looks around helplessly and says, "Do we have more jars?" A shrug. A terrified shrug. Fantastic. Back on the walls, the assault intensifies. Norman knights bark orders, directing waves of infantry toward weak points. Archers aim specifically for officers. Ladders multiply like weeds. A section of wall to the south is suddenly swarmed, so many climbers that defenders can't shove them fast enough. A soldier cries, "We're losing the tower!" You race toward the tower, dodging arrows and half stumbling up the stairs. When you burst onto the platform, the scene is chaos. Normans have reached the top. 2 defenders are locked in desperate combat. One Norman swings a warhammer, cracking a soldier's chestplate. Another drives a sword into a defender's thigh. The platform is slick with dust and sweat and fear. You grab a fallen spear, thrust it forward, catch a Norman in the shoulder. He snarls, pivoting toward you, just as a Byzantine marine slams a shield into him, sending the attacker tumbling. The defenders reclaim the platform, barely, but more ladders rise, and then it happens. Near the northern section of the wall, a shout goes up. They found a weak point. Your stomach drops. You know exactly what that means. The Normans have identified a section of old mortar, cracked and crumbling, long neglected, and now they're striking it with picks and hammers, knocking stones loose. If that wall falls, the city falls. You run along the battlements, heart-pounding, dodging broken stone, ducking beneath arrows. When you reach the weak point, you see a dozen men desperately trying to reinforce it with planks and sandbags. It looks pathetic. One impact from a proper siege engine would turn it into rubble. You lock eyes with a terrified defender. He whispers, "They know. They know this is where we break." And you know he's right. The Normans push harder. Their chants rise, echoing across the field. "Roma! Roma! Roma!" A chilling, thunderous declaration. The defenders tremble. A captain shouts, "Hold them! Hold the line!" But his voice is drowned out by the next impact, so powerful it cracks the stone beneath your feet. The wall groans, the city groans, the defenders groan, and the Normans, they grin, because they can feel it. Thessaloniki is beginning to break. The moment the wall cracks, a sound rolls through Thessaloniki that you feel more than hear. A deep, shuddering, bone-level vibration. The kind that makes birds scatter. The kind that makes civilians freeze mid-step. The kind that tells a city its skin has just torn. You grip the nearest Milan, heart thudding, as a thin web of fractures spreads across the weak section of stone dust drifts down in soft clouds. Defenders stare in horrified silence. One whispers, "Saint Demetrios preserve us," as if the saint himself might reach up and glue the wall back together. Spoiler, he doesn't. Because the Normans see it too, and they move fast. A roar surges from their lines, not chaotic but focused, disciplined, full of terrible purpose. Siege teams redirect instantly, dragging heavier rams toward the compromised section. Crossbowmen reposition to cover the approach. The entire Norman formation pivots like a single organism. They want that break. They smell it. They're hunting it. You shout for reinforcements as defenders scramble along the battlements, dragging planks, sandbags, broken furniture, anything that might hold back the inevitable. But deep down, every man knows he's stacking feathers against a flood below. The Norman captain lifts his sword and points at the cracked stones. "There," he bellows, and the nightmare begins. The first blow from the reinforced ram hits like a thunderclap. A deep, sickening crack vibrates through the wall. Pebbles shower down. A defender loses his footing and falls back, screaming. Another impact lands and another, each one carving deeper into the wound. "Shore it up," a Byzantine officer screams. Men shove beams into place. Others hammer nails with frantic speed. Someone throws a barrel of dirt against the crack. It's useless. The next strike splits the top layer of mortar. A stone tumbles free. A cheer erupts from the Norman lines. A defender grabs your arm wild-eyed. If that wall goes, they'll flood in like water. He's right. Then comes the sky-darkening volley. Norman crossbows fire in perfect unison. The air fills with bolts, hundreds of them, arching upward before slamming down onto the battlements. You duck behind a merlin as two bolts thud into the stone beside your head. Defenders drop everywhere, arms pierced, legs buckling, helmets ringing from impacts. A young archer near you screams as a bolt drives through his forearm. His commander tears it free and shouts, "Get below, now!" The boy staggers away, clutching his bleeding arm. More ladders rise, more rams strike, more cracks spread. The wall quivers like an old tree in a storm. Then, with horrifying timing, David Komnenos arrives on the scene. He strides toward the battlements flanked by attendants, eyes wide but trying desperately to look composed. You can almost hear him practicing excuses in his head. "What is the situation?" he demands. A captain rounds on him, face drenched in sweat. "The situation? The wall is failing. We need reinforcements." David scans the chaos. Arrows flying, defenders dying, the wall literally shedding stones, and replies with impeccable Komnenos-level wisdom, "Stay calm." A soldier stares at him. "Stay calm, my lord, they're breaking through." David waves a hand. "Walls don't fall so easily." A stone block the size of a goat chooses that exact moment to dislodge and crash down into the Norman ranks. The Normans cheer. David flinches. Well, they shouldn't fall so easily. You resist the urge to push him off the battlements and let gravity teach him what falling means. But there's no time for fantasies because the cracks widen. The Normans shift into their final assault posture. Shield units press tighter at the front, protecting the ram teams behind them. Armoured infantry brace ladders against the trembling wall. The chanting picks up again, resonant, merciless, echoing across the plain. "Roma! Roma! Roma!" It feels like the whole world is turning against Thessaloniki. Defenders dig in. Swords scrape against shields. Archers clutch the few remaining arrows. A marine beside you mutters, "If we had one bucket of fire, just one, we could melt them off those ladders." But the governor never stocked fire, because why prepare for war when you can hold feasts? The next blow splits the wall. A jagged fracture opens from top to bottom, small but deadly. A gust of dusty air bursts through the gap like the wall itself is gasping. A defender shouts, "They're breaking through! Brace! Brace!" Men throw their bodies against the failing stones. Sandbags burst open, spilling dirt into the cracks. Wooden beams snap. Someone drags a dead ox cart and wedges it sideways to absorb pressure. Below, the Norman ram backs up. 1 meter, 2 meters, 5 meters. They're giving themselves room. A soldier whispers, "God help us!" The ram crew charges. Boom! The wall shudders. More stones fall. A scream rises from the ranks. The Norman captain shouts, "Again! Boom!" The crack widens. You feel the platform beneath you shift. The defenders stagger, one last blow. Boom! The wall gives. A section erupts outward in an explosion of stone dust and shattered mortar. Light floods through the breach. The defenders nearest the collapse are hurled backward in a wave of debris. Some vanish in the cloud. Others tumble screaming into the gap below, and the Normans, sensing history, charge. You watch them surge through the breach, shields up, swords ready, voices thunderous. The defenders recoil. A soldier beside you whispers hoarsely, "We can't hold them. There's too many." He's right. This is no longer a siege. This is entry. This is invasion. This is Thessaloniki's nightmare beginning its next chapter. The Normans pour in. The city staggers. And the fall has truly begun. The breach isn't just a hole in the wall. It's a wound, gaping and raw, pouring enemy soldiers into Thessaloniki like blood spilling into open air. Dust churns in thick clouds, stinging your eyes, making every breath feel like swallowing sand. Screams echo in the confined space between collapsed stones. Somewhere beneath the haze you hear the heavy thud of Norman boots hitting Byzantine soil. The defenders nearest the breach scatter backward, coughing, choking, some limping, some dragging wounded comrades out of the way. Others freeze entirely, staring in horror at the wave of ironclad men emerging from the dust. You don't blame them. What's coming isn't an assault, it's a flood. "Form a line! Form a line!" a commander roars, voice cracking. Men rush to obey, shoving into a rough shield wall that looks more like a nervous crowd than a military formation. Shields clatter together unevenly. Spears shake in trembling hands. A boy barely old enough to shave whispers, "Please let me live. Please let me live," over and over like a prayer caught in a loop. Then the Normans hit hard. The first impact slams into the Byzantine line with bone-rattling force. Shield edges screech against each other. A defender cries out as a Norman sword bites into his arm, sending his spear clattering across the stones. Another Byzantine soldier plants his feet and thrusts forward, catching a Norman in the throat, only to be bulldozed by 2 more attackers who slam into him shoulder first. It's chaos. You thrust your spear into the melee, striking at armor joints, helping push attackers back. Though every inch feels like trying to shove a boulder up a hill, the Normans fight like men possessed, disciplined, relentless, terrifyingly confident. Behind them, more pour through the breach. The city's defenders might as well be trying to hold back a tide with their bare hands. A soldier next to you, an older man with a scar down his cheek, grips your arm. "We must seal the breach," he shouts. You look at the gaping hole, at the stream of Normans flowing through it, at the rubble strewn everywhere. "There's nothing to seal it with," you shout back. He curses, then hurls a broken plank at an oncoming attacker. The Norman bats it aside like an annoying fly. Within minutes, the defenders realize something horrifying. The Normans aren't just trying to break through, they're trying to expand the breach. Siege crews rush forward behind the first wave of infantry. Men carrying picks, hammers, hooked tools. Even as combat rages, they start ripping at the loose stones, widening the gap. A defender lunges toward one of them, but a Norman knight intercepts him with a brutal shield bash that sends him sprawling. A voice screams from somewhere above, "They're making it bigger! They want cavalry through!" Your blood runs cold. Mounted knights inside a city is the medieval equivalent of letting wolves loose inside a sheep pen. You fight harder. Up on the western parapets, Byzantine archers try to rain arrows on the attackers, but Norman crossbowmen pin them down immediately. Bolts whistle past your head, thudding into stone, shields, flesh. An archer to your left collapses with a bolt buried in his ribs. Another tries to pull him to safety but is struck through the leg. He screams as he falls, clutching the parapet. You drag them back behind the battlements, teeth clenched. The wounded archer gasps. Save the boy. He has family. But you don't have time to answer. The Normans push forward again. The defenders finally manage to form a tighter line, bracing against the rubble. A captain with a dented helmet shouts orders, swinging his sword fiercely. Hold! Hold the line! The city's behind you! You plant your feet, shove your shoulder behind your shield and brace the Normans' charge. The crash sounds like thunder. You feel the force slam through your entire body, driving you back a step. You grit your teeth and push forward all around you. Shields lock, spear points thrust, boots scrape. The defenders hold, for now, but barely. Every inch feels like a miracle. Then you spot the next horror Norman engineers wheeling forward a crude wooden frame, half finished but functional enough. A siege tower? No, something smaller. A fire platform. Oh no, you mutter. The Normans begin preparing torches. If they set the rubble ablaze, the defenders will suffocate in smoke before they are even struck down. Fire! Someone screams. They're trying to burn us out! It's true. Flames flicker to life near the breach as Norman engineers ignite dried brush piled around the rubble. A defender hurls a bucket of sand, but another fire starts, then another. Within moments, thick smoke billows upward, curling around shields, crawling into your lungs. You cough violently, eyes watering. This is bad, the scarred soldier from before says, voice hoarse. This is very, very bad. You agree wholeheartedly. The defenders begin to falter, coughing, stumbling back from the smoke. The Normans push harder, sensing weakness. The line bends, then breaks. A group of Norman infantry surges through the gap. Panic explodes. Fall back! Fall back! You turn and run with the defenders, retreating toward the nearest street intersection. Behind you, Norman war cries echo, mixing with the crackle of fire and the clatter of rubble under their boots. At the mouth of a narrow street, a sergeant grabs you and shouts, "We need to block them off! Bring wagons, crates, anything that slows them!" You sprint toward nearby homes, pounding on doors, urging people outside. Aid the defences, bring anything heavy! Terrified but determined, families drag out furniture, chests, tool carts. You help overturn a merchant's stall, push a barrel into place, shove a bench to block the path. The barricade grows, uneven, ugly, but something. The sergeant shouts, "Archers, to the roofs!" Men climb ladders onto nearby buildings, knocking arrows despite shaking hands. The Normans appear at the far end of the street, shields raised, swords dripping with battle. You raise your spear. The barricade quivers. The Normans roar, and Thessaloniki braces for the next wave. But as you look at the street, too narrow for full formations, too tight for a shield wall, you feel a spark of hope. Here at least the Normans can't swarm in overwhelming numbers. Here, houses and corners become allies. Here, maybe the city can fight back maybe, but only if the defenders don't break first. And with the Normans regrouping at the breach, hungry for deeper slaughter, you know the next minutes might decide the fate of the entire city. The barricade groans under its own weight. Piled crates, overturned wagons, broken furniture, anything the defenders could drag into place fast enough to choke the narrow street. You push your shoulder against a heavy barrel one last time, bracing it between a toppled table and a chunk of fallen masonry. It holds. Barely. But barely is the only victory Thessaloniki gets today. The Normans gather at the far end of the street. Their shields crowd together into a tight wedge, iron rims scraping the paving stones. You can make out their faces beneath helmets, grim, confident, eager. These are not men reconsidering the wisdom of pressing deeper into a hostile city. These are men searching for the fastest path to plunder. "Archers!" the sergeant roars from above. "Ready!" Arrows angle downward from the rooftop edge. "Loose!" A rain of shafts falls into the Norman formation. Some deflect off shields, others sink into exposed arms or legs. A few men stumble, dropping weapons, but the Normans don't falter. They raise their shields overhead and push forward like a slow-moving beast with iron scales. You brace behind the barricade, adjusting your grip on your spear. Sweat drips from your brow, stinging your eyes. The smell of smoke from the breach drifts through the streets, a constant reminder that the wall behind you is burning and collapsing and dying. The city is bleeding from multiple wounds now, and you're plugging one of them with furniture. The Normans reach the barricade. The wedge slams into it with the weight of a charging bull, wood cracks, crates shift. A massive Norman drives his shoulder into a wagon wheel stuck in the structure. It jolts inward a full inch. "Hold it!" someone shouts. "Push back! Brace yourselves!" You dig your feet into the ground, planting your heel against broken stone, shoving your full weight into the makeshift wall. Others do the same, bodies trembling with effort. For a moment the barricade holds, but only a moment. The next impact rocks the entire structure. A table leg snaps. A barrel rolls free. The Normans surge forward, prying at planks, smashing at debris with axes. One succeeds in yanking a crate aside, just enough to create a hand's-width gap. A Norman reaches through, grabbing a defender's tunic and pulling him forward. The man screams. You stab your spear through the gap, striking the attacker's wrist. He yelps and recoils, but the damage is done. The defenders see how quickly this barrier can unravel. The sergeant shouts, "Rooftops, again!" More arrows fly. One catches a Norman in the throat. He collapses, shield clattering. Another sticks into a helmet, ricocheting off with a ringing clang. But the Normans adapt instantly. 3 crossbowmen kneel behind the shield wall, crank their weapons, and fire upward. A rooftop archer cries out and tumbles onto the street. Another ducks too late. A bolt strikes the edge of the roof tiles, shattering them into sharp fragments. The roof attack loses steam. "Down!" the sergeant yells. "Everyone down!" You lower yourself behind the barricade as a wave of crossbow bolts hisses overhead. The Normans are tightening their grip. Suddenly a sharp cry rings from behind you. The southern street, they're flanking, you spin. Another column of Normans pushes through a side alley, trying to bypass the barricade entirely. Their shields flash in the sunlight as they rush forward. The defenders nearest the alley scatter, unprepared. The sergeant curses. "They're splitting us!" You and several others sprint across the intersection to block the alleyway. It's narrower than the main street, barely wide enough for 3 men abreast. But that might be the only advantage you have left. A young soldier drags a water cart into the gap. Another smashes loose bricks into place. You take position in front of them, panting, adjusting your stance. Footsteps thunder toward you. A Norman bursts from the alley's mouth, helmet painted red, axe raised. You thrust. The spear strikes his thigh. He roars in pain, swinging his axe downward. You barely roll aside as the blade cracks against the cobblestone, sending chips flying. Another defender slams his shield into the Norman, forcing him back a step, just enough for archers above to fire into the alley. Arrows rattle off shields. One finds a gap. A Norman collapses, clutching his side. Then another wave comes. The alley is a choke point, but choke points work both ways. If the defenders lose even one step, the Normans will flood out like water bursting from a snapped pipe. "Hold them!" you shout, and somehow, miraculously, you do. For now, but the real collapse is happening behind you. "We need help!" a voice screams. "The breach is widening!" You risk a glance over your shoulder. A huge plume of smoke rises where the wall once stood. Thick, black, oily, crawling up the sky like a dark omen. Flames still lick at the rubble, and through that smoke more Norman silhouettes appear. More men, more ladders, more chaos. The defenders at the breach are falling back into the city. Some limp, some bleed, some don't move at all. A boy no older than 15 staggers by, face smeared with soot and blood. You grab him gently. "What's happening?" "They're in the..." he coughs. "They're in the houses." Your stomach twists. The Normans have begun entering homes near the breach, using side courtyards and back doors to infiltrate deeper into the city, bypassing the main barricades entirely. It's no longer a clean battle line. It's a spreading infection. Every street is a risk, every corner a possible ambush, and the governor? Nowhere. Not on the walls, not at the barricades, not rallying troops. You don't know where he is, but he's not here. Which means Thessaloniki's defence rests on scared, exhausted soldiers and clusters of civilians who refuse to abandon their homes. A sudden horn blast tears through the air. Not Norman, Byzantine, a retreat signal. The captain at the main barricade shouts, Fall back to the inner district!" Panic ripples through the defenders. "Where?" someone cries. "Which streets are safe?" There are no safe streets. The barricade shudders again as Normans force another gap. A defender is yanked out screaming. The formation falls apart. "Go!" the sergeant roars at you. "Guide the civilians! Fall back now!" You grab a woman carrying 2 children and usher her down a side street. Behind you, boots thunder. A Norman shouts. A defender screams. Something collapses. the city becomes a maze of smoke, shouting and terror. You weave through twisting alleys, helping whoever you can. A man with a wounded leg, a girl separated from her parents, a priest holding a relic wrapped in cloth. All while Norman footsteps echo closer and closer, every block you pass feels like watching another piece of Thessaloniki crumble. Finally you reach the inner district, narrower streets, steeper walls, the last true line of defence. Soldiers form a thin shield wall here, trembling, exhausted, but still standing. You step behind them, breathing hard, chest burning. The Normans haven't reached this line yet, but they will. Because the city's outer defences, they're gone, breached, burning. And Thessaloniki, for the first time in centuries, feels truly mortal. You stand behind the thinning shield wall of the inner district, chest heaving, sweat stinging your eyes. Around you, defenders brace themselves against walls and pillars, gripping shields that feel heavier by the second, clutching spears worn down from hours of desperate fighting. The enemy hasn't reached this line yet, but you can hear them coming. The clash of steel, the shouts, the crashing of doors as Normans force their way through homes. Every sound echoes through the narrow streets like thunder crawling closer. A captain raises his voice, trying to rally the defenders. "Hold this line. This is the heart of the city. Hold!" You admire his optimism. What he should have shouted was, "Try your best." Smoke drifts down the street, carried by a warm breeze that feels grotesquely peaceful compared to the chaos it delivers. The fire at the breach hasn't been contained. If anything, it's spreading through abandoned houses, turning alleyways into choking tunnels. People cough violently as smoke creeps in. A woman slips behind the shield wall with a child wrapped in her arms. A defender guides her to safety. Everyone plays whatever role they can now. Soldier, medic, rescuer, witness. The city groans like a wounded animal. And then you see them. The first wave of Normans turning the corner, shields raised. Axes gleaming. A dozen at first, then dozens more. They march through the smoke like spectres of iron and fire. Behind them, you hear the faint ringing of household pots, the crash of furniture, the shrill cries of civilians dragged from hiding. The Normans aren't just advancing, they're pillaging as they go. A soldier whispers beside you, "This isn't a battle line, it's a flood line, and we're the sandbags." You grip your spear tighter. The first clash comes swift. The Normans surge forward, slamming into the Byzantine defence with terrifying force. The narrow street helps the defenders, funneling the attackers, but it also concentrates the shock. The front line buckles, shields rattle like kettle drums. A defender screams as a Norman mace crushes his arm. Another is shoved into a wall so hard you feel the impact in your teeth. You drive your spear into a gap between shields, catching a Norman in the hip. He falls with a grunt, yanking another man with him. A small victory, more like a pause button. Because the Normans keep coming. Their commander shouts something in Italian, and the formation tightens. They begin a coordinated push, shields locked, stepping forward slowly but inevitably. The defenders give ground, inch by inch. A marine yells, "Hold them! They can't get past this point!" But his voice cracks, because everyone knows they can. And if they do, the inner district, churches, treasuries, markets, homes, will become a slaughterhouse. You glance upward. Rooftop archers fire a few scattered shots, but their arrows are nearly gone. One archer rummages through his quiver in disbelief. Empty. Another tries to retrieve bolts from the roof tiles. They break in his hands like brittle twigs. Above, the sun hides behind a cloud, dimming the street. Smoke fills the gap, curling like dark fingers around the defenders' faces. The Normans push again. You shout and brace your shield. The impact nearly knocks you off your feet. A defender to your right drops to one knee. A Norman tries to push forward through the gap, but a spear catches him in the chest. He falls, dragging down two of his allies. The defenders cheer, short, ragged, desperate. Then the cheering dies, because a loud crash echoes from a side alley. You turn just in time to see a Norman sledgehammer tear apart a wooden door, and suddenly a second wave of attackers pours in from the flank. You swear under your breath. The defenders pivot clumsily, trying to form a new line, but they're too slow, too tired, too spread out. A shield wall requires strength and discipline right now. The defenders have neither. A Norman swings his axe into a defender's shoulder from the side. The man collapses instantly. Another defender attempts to fill the gap, but a spear strikes him in the leg. The line fractures. The Normans howl in triumph. A defender shouts, "Retreat! Fall back to the forum!" The captain roars, "No retreat! Hold!" He doesn't finish. A Norman sword cuts him down. The men waver. You lock eyes with the scarred soldier who fought beside you at the breach. He nods once. "Go," he says. The defenders break. You wrench yourself free from the collapsing formation and run, dodging fallen bodies, hurdling debris, pulling 2 wounded soldiers with you. Screams echo behind you as the Normans flood into the inner district like water surging through a shattered dam. You reach the forum, a huge open plaza surrounded by colonnades and workshops. Civilians cluster under the arches, trembling. Priests clutch icons and relics, chanting desperately as if their voices alone could hold back an army. A dozen remaining defenders form a thin semicircle facing the street you just fled. Breathing hard, eyes burning with fear and smoke, an officer staggers toward you. "The governor?" he gasps. "Where is the governor?" You shake your head. No one has seen him since morning. The officer swears. Of course he ran. You don't have the energy to disagree. A deep horn blast echoes from the street, the Norman signal for a successful penetration. You feel the dread settling like stone in your stomach. A handful of defenders gather near a small fountain in the forum. Someone whispers, "This is the last stand." Another says, "The Normans are too many." A third mutters, "God help us." For a moment the world feels too quiet. Then the first Norman shield appears at the far end of the plaza, a second, a third, and then an entire formation turns the corner, shields raised, eyes glinting, blood splattered across their armour. They see the forum, they see the civilians, they see the defenders, and they grin. One raises his sword and roars. The Normans charge. You brace your weapon. The defenders tighten their line. Civilians scream and scatter, and somewhere above, bells ring from St. Demetrios's basilica, not for worship but for warning. Thessaloniki's final defences are crumbling, and the Normans, they're just getting started. The Norman charge hits the forum like a storm, loud, brutal, sudden. Their boots pound against the stone pavement, shields angled forward in a deadly wedge meant to split defences cleanly in half. You brace yourself behind the thin, shaking shield wall of Byzantine survivors, but it feels like bracing a fishing boat against a tidal wave. The impact rattles your bones. Shields slam, swords crash, men scream. A defender to your left is knocked backward immediately, his shield torn from his grasp. A Norman lunges in to finish him, but you thrust your spear forward, catching the attacker in the chest and forcing him back a step. Another Norman swings a mace toward your head. You duck, stumble, and feel the wind of the blow graze your hair. The defenders tighten their line, but it's barely a line at all. Just a handful of exhausted soldiers trying to hold together under impossible pressure. "Push!" someone shouts. "Hold!" another cries. But the voices waver, trembling like the men shouting them. The Normans press harder. Their front ranks hack and bash with tireless fury. Behind them, crossbowmen reload with mechanical calm, sending bolts over their comrades' shoulders into the crowd of civilians cowering beneath the colonnades. One bolt hits a stone pillar and ricochets, striking an elderly man in the leg. Another buries itself in a wooden door behind you. Panic erupts among the civilians, shrieks, chaos, hands grabbing at anything resembling safety. Priests clutch relics, some holding them aloft as if expecting miracles. Mothers crouch over children. Merchants clutch their ledgers to their chests, believing perhaps the Normans won't kill anyone holding paperwork. You parry another blow and step back. Just one step, but it feels like surrender. A Norman surges forward through the gap you create. A defender tries to stop him but gets thrown aside like a sack of grain. The line buckles. The first fracture appears. A surviving officer roars, fall back to the basilica." It's not strategy, it's desperation. The Basilica of St. Demetrios is the largest structure nearby, its stone walls thick, its doors heavy. It could serve as a temporary refuge. Could. The defenders begin retreating in small steps, trying to stay organised. But the Normans smell the shift immediately. They charge harder. A marine beside you grabs your arm and shouts, "Move! Move!" You follow him as the Byzantine line collapses inch by inch. Civilians flee behind you like a tidal wave, crying, stumbling, praying. You guide a limping man toward the basilica steps as screams erupt from behind. A group of Normans break away from the main force and sprint toward the colonnades. They drag out anyone they find hiding. One man attempts to fight back with a broken chair leg. He lasts about 2 seconds. A woman clutching a baby screams as soldiers yank her from the shadows. You grip your spear tighter, fury boiling in your chest, but a defender grabs your shoulder and pulls you back. You can't save everyone, he says, voice shaking. Maybe not. But the guilt still stings. You reach the basilica steps and help haul its heavy wooden doors shut, though dozens still pour inside seeking shelter. A priest slams a wooden bar across the entrance and shouts, "Inside, quickly," as more civilians pack into the nave. Defenders form up just outside the doors, creating a semicircle of shields and spears. It's a tiny force, maybe 20 men, maybe fewer, but it's all that stands between the Normans and a massacre inside the church. The Normans advance across the forum again. Their commander raises his sword and points at the basilica. He wants the church, and he means to take it. The second clash is worse than the first. The defenders have nowhere to fall back to now. Their shields clatter together. Their breath comes in ragged gasps. Their arms shake from exhaustion. You feel the sting of sweat running into cuts you didn't even know you had. Your muscles ache, your palms blister, your mind fogs. The Normans hit like a hammer, spears splinter. Shields crack. A defender beside you screams as a sword tears into his thigh. He collapses and a Norman leaps over him. You pivot and ram your shield into the attacker's chest, knocking him backward. But another fills his place immediately. A defender shouts, "Stand fast!" But standing fast feels like trying to hold a door shut against a hurricane. A Norman knight steps forward, towering, armoured head to toe, swinging a sword that seems far too large for any normal human. His first blow knocks a shield aside as if swatting a fly. His second cleaves into a marine's collarbone, dropping him instantly. The defenders recoil. The church doors rattle behind you as terrified civilians brace them from the inside. You hear sobbing, praying, the frantic rustle of bodies trying to hide behind icons and pillars. The knight raises his sword for another swing, but an arrow whizzes from the roof of the basilica. It strikes him between the plates of his armour. He grunts and stumbles. Another arrow follows, then another. The rooftop defenders. Somehow a handful survived. "Cover them," you shout. The defenders surge in a burst of raw, desperate energy, slashing, stabbing, shoving Normans back a few steps. It isn't victory, but it's oxygen. Then the rooftop archer's luck ends. A Norman crossbowman fires. Clean, precise. The arrow arcs upward and strikes the archer through the throat. He falls silently from the roof, hitting the stone below with a sickening thud. The defender's hope dies with him. The Normans press again. The line collapses. A Norman sword knocks your spear aside. Another slams into your shield and sends you staggering. You stumble backward up the basilica steps. The defenders to your right break completely, fleeing inside. On your left, a Norman tackles a soldier and drives him into the paving stones. You back toward the doors as they crack open just enough for you to slip inside. "Close it!" someone screams. You pull the door shut as a Norman sword swings through the gap, scraping your shield. The wooden bar slams down. Thud, thud, thud. Normans pound against the doors. The church shakes. The basilica is full, packed with terrified men, women, children, priests, wounded soldiers. The air is thick with incense and fear. You lean your back against the door, chest heaving, sweat pouring down your face. Someone whispers a prayer. Someone screams. Someone asks where the Emperor's army is. No one answers, because everyone knows. The Normans have breached the inner district, the forum has fallen, and Thessaloniki is a cage with wolves inside. Inside the Basilica of St. Demetrios, the air feels thick, so thick you can almost chew it. Incense burns in trembling hands. Candles flicker wildly in the draughts that slip through cracks in the wooden doors. Dozens of civilians huddle together beneath mosaics of saints, whose golden faces stare down with silent, unblinking calm. Babies cry softly. Old men whisper prayers. The wounded groan on makeshift bedding. And through it all, the low, rhythmic pounding against the basilica's outer doors reminds everyone that safety is only temporary. You brace your back against the warm wood, feeling each Norman strike through your ribs like a second heartbeat. A defender beside you wipes blood from his cheek. His own, someone else's, who knows anymore, and whispers, "They'll burn us out. They'll burn the basilica." You swallow. The thought settles like ice in your stomach. A priest climbs atop the steps inside the nave. His voice trembles but rises clear. Saint Demetrios will protect his city, civilians murmur. A few lift icons. One man falls to his knees sobbing, but the defenders exchange looks. Tired, grim, hollow. Saints don't stop iron. Saints don't stop men who sail across the sea thirsty for plunder. Saints don't reinforce walls or stop fire. And right now, a whole lot more than prayer is pounding on the doors. Crack. The wood splinters. A child screams. His mother covers his ears. You tighten your grip on your shield. The defenders form a semicircle around the entrance, spears angled forward. Another blow. Another crack. Dust falls from the ceiling. They'll break through, someone whispers. No, a soldier mutters. They'll find another way in. He's right. Because even as the basilica doors groan under blows, the Normans have begun flooding into the surrounding district. You hear them? Running boots, laughter twisted with hunger, screams cut short, objects smashing. The basilica might hold for a few minutes. The city will not. A defender rushes down the central aisle, breathless. Normans are moving around the back. They're on the side streets. You glance toward the rear of the basilica. There are side entrances, strong but not as strong as the main doors. Civilians gasp and clutch each other tighter. The captain in charge wipes soot from his face. We split our strength now. We're finished, he murmurs. So what do? You ask quietly. Hope they come through one door at a time. Spoiler, they won't. A huge crash shakes the entire basilica. Not the doors, the walls. Normans have started using axes on the wooden shutters of side windows. The shutters shudder under repeated blows, splinters raining down on the stone floor. Candles flicker violently in the draught. The defenders scramble. Some run toward the windows. Others stay at the doors. Everyone is stretched thin as parchment. A mother tries to calm her daughter, but the girl keeps staring at the windows as if expecting monsters to crawl through. You hear a Norman shout something guttural outside. Orders, the pounding intensifies. A defender at the eastern window shouts, "They're breaking through!" You rush to join him. The window frame trembles violently, wood splinters. A Norman arm reaches through, swiping blindly. A defender swings his sword and chops at the wrist. A scream erupts from outside. Then a crash. The shutter breaks inward. A Norman soldier climbs through the window, landing hard on the basilica floor. Before he can rise, a marine rams a spear through his chest, but another climbs through, then another. The line falters. A defender shouts, "Reinforce the flank, the flank!" You rush to help, shield up, spear ready. You thrust at a Norman crawling through the gap and send him tumbling backward. But more continue to come, their helmets shining, their boots thudding against the stone. Blood smears across the marble tiles. A woman sobs, "Holy Mother, preserve us!" The basilica is no longer a sanctuary, it is a battlefield. And the Normans, they're inside. A deep boom shakes the air again. The main doors burst inward, one panel splitting, then collapsing entirely. Normans pour through the breach, roaring like unleashed animals. The defenders brace, slamming shields together, spears angled, but they are hopelessly outnumbered. One Norman grabs a defender by the hair and drags him to the ground. Another kicks aside a fallen shrine candle, sending wax skidding across the floor. A third swings his sword into a column, sparks flying. The basilica erupts into a swirl of chaos. Shouts, screams, steel clashing against stone. You jab your spear into a Norman's side, but he twists and slashes at your knee. You stumble back, blocking just in time. A defender beside you blocks a blow meant for a priest. Someone yells for help. Someone else cries for a lost child. The Normans push deeper. They head straight for the altar. A group of priests try to block their path, holding icons out like shields. The Normans laugh, a cold, merciless sound, and shove them aside. One priest falls, his icon skidding across the floor. The defenders break, not from cowardice, from math. Too many attackers, too few men. The captain shouts, "Retreat to the upper gallery, move!" You retreat with the surviving defenders, pushing through the terrified civilians, guiding them toward the stairs leading to the basilica's upper galleries. People scramble, trip, scream. A Norman grabs a woman's shawl. You slam your shield into him and pull her free. She sobs and runs. Up the stairs you go, hearts pounding, bodies bruised, smoke stinging your eyes. The upper gallery gives you a momentary vantage point and a horrifying view. The Normans flood the basilica floor, ripping open chests, dragging terrified people from hiding, kicking over benches, tearing down curtains, stomping through broken shrines. Gold glints in their fists. Silver flashes in their belts. A full sack begins to form on the floor of Byzantium's second city. One Norman looks upward and spots you. He points, and more begin climbing. Because no sanctuary is sacred now. No gallery safe. No height unreachable. Thessaloniki is falling piece by piece, soul by soul. And you're running out of places to run. You don't remember making the decision to run across the upper gallery. But suddenly you're moving, boots slipping on marble dust, shoulder brushing against ancient mosaics that shimmer faintly in the smoke-thick air. The defenders who've survived this far cling to the balustrade, gasping, bleeding, staring down at the chaos unfolding below. Somewhere beneath your feet, centuries of prayers lie embedded in stone. Tonight, they'll mix with screams. Normans swarm the basilica floor like fire ants, sweeping between columns, overturning benches, tearing through anything that looks valuable. The sound is overwhelming. Steel clashing, wood splintering, civilians crying out, the echo of boots striking sacred ground, and rising above it all, laughter. The cruel, triumphant laughter of men who know the city is theirs. A marine next to you peers down and whispers, "We can't hold the gallery. They'll climb after us." You nod, because he's right. Already a trio of Normans rush up the staircase beneath the gallery. Their shields scrape the walls as they ascend. Their helmets glint with reflected candlelight. The first reaches the top and swings his sword before he even clears the final step. You step forward and thrust your spear, catching him beneath the chin. He staggers backward, slamming into the man behind him. Both tumble down the stairs in a clatter of steel and curses, but the third keeps climbing, relentless. Another defender joins you at the stairwell, bracing his shield. "Again!" he shouts. Together you hold the top of the stairs, barely, jabbing downward, blocking upward swings, retreating when necessary. But every breath you take burns like fire. Smoke creeps up from the burning homes outside. Dust settles on your skin in gritty layers. Your muscles tremble from exhaustion. You've been fighting for hours. The Normans? They've been fighting too, but they came fed, armoured, prepared, and drunk on momentum. Another group approaches the stairs. This time, 5 men. Too many for your tiny defence. The marine beside you yells, fall back before they surround us." You stumble away from the railing, following the defenders toward the far end of the gallery, where a narrow door leads to the basilica's rear chambers. As you push through, the door slams behind you. A beam drops into place, a flimsy barrier, but a barrier nonetheless. The corridor beyond is dim and cramped, a world away from the soaring beauty of the nave. You move in single file, guiding civilians who've managed to flee the floors below. A child clings to your cloak. An old woman grips your arm and whispers, "St. Demetrios will not let them harm us." Her voice shakes. You don't know what to say. Peace feels like a ghost tonight. You emerge into a small chamber lined with niches for relics. A handful of defenders stand guard here, blades raised, eyes wide. One of them, a young soldier with soot-streaked cheeks, stares at you. "Where's the governor?" he asks, voice cracking. You shake your head. Silence follows. Not one man in the room believes the governor still commands anything. A dull pounding echoes from behind the door. You just barricaded. Boom! 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 Norman's testing the barrier. A final boom shakes dust from the ceiling. "They'll break through soon," someone mutters. You turn to the only remaining exit, a narrow stair leading up toward the roof. "The rooftops," you say. "If we can get across the roofs, we can reach the palace district. It isn't much of a plan, but it's all you have." The defenders usher civilians up the stairs first. You follow behind, helping a limping merchant climb. The stairwell is cramped, forcing you to duck beneath low ceilings and squeeze past tightly packed bodies. The air grows colder as you ascend. A rooftop door opens with a creak. Cool night wind hits your face like a blessing. You step out onto the roof tiles, gazing across the city, and your stomach drops. Thessaloniki burns. Flames spread through the lower districts, turning houses into pillars of fire. Smoke pours upward, thick and black, blotting out the stars. Norman soldiers swarm through the streets below like metal-clad locusts. Screams drift upward on the wind, every kind of scream. Fear, agony, rage, despair. The city that woke yesterday morning bustling and proud now glows like a dying ember. Behind you, defenders usher civilians across the roof, guiding them toward a narrow ledge that leads to a neighbouring building. It's dangerous. It's steep. It's the only option. "Careful," a soldier warns as a woman slips. "Hands on the wall, slow." Below, a Norman horn blares. Another. And another. The horn calls echo across the burning city, rising and falling in a chilling rhythm. "They're signalling units," a marine says quietly. "They're spreading through the city in waves." You exchange a look with him. Thessaloniki isn't just under attack anymore. It's being harvested. Behind you, a crash shakes the basilica roof. Normans have reached the upper gallery. They're smashing through the barricaded door. You hurry civilians across the ledge, guiding a boy with wide, terrified eyes. "Don't look down," you tell him gently. "Look at me." He nods, though tears streak his face. A woman whispers, "Where do we go?" You look across the rooftops, an uneven maze of tiles, chimneys, broken beams. "We go," you say, wherever they aren't. It's not bravery, it's survival. You cross onto the next building, helping others up behind you. The roof shakes under the movement. Tiles crack. Sparks drift upward from fires below. The wind carries the faint sound of laughter, the kind that curdles your stomach. Suddenly a defender shouts, "They're climbing after us," you whirl. Norman soldiers are scaling the basilica walls, using cracks and protruding stones as makeshift footholds. One reaches the gutter. Another climbs directly beside him. Their armour glints in the firelight. "Hurry!" you shout. The defenders shove civilians onto the roof ahead, forming a rearguard at the edge. You join them. A Norman hauls himself over the rooftop lip. The scarred soldier from earlier steps forward and kicks him in the face. The Norman tumbles back, scraping against stone, falling with a scream into the alley below. Another climbs up, and another. You stab downward with your spear, catching one in the shoulder. A marine swings his sword, cutting at fingers clinging to the edge. One attacker falls, but the rest climb like spiders. One defender whispers, "We can't hold this roof." You agree, but there's nowhere else to go. Below, the Normans flood the streets. Behind you, they storm the basilica. Ahead, the rooftops stretch toward the palace district, but that distance feels like miles. For a moment, you stand on the rooftop and watch Thessaloniki burn. Its walls breached, its markets looted, its people hunted. The night glows red and gold, shimmering with fire and blood. Smoke blots out the stars. The city's great churches flicker like lanterns in a storm. You close your eyes. The basilica door breaks behind you, and the next nightmare begins. You barely manage 2 steps across the slanted rooftop before the next wave of Normans pours out of the basilica like a burst dam. Their boots slam onto the stone galleries below, their helmets glint in the firelit night, and their voices rise in a triumphant roar that seems to vibrate through the roof tiles beneath your feet. You force yourself forward, pulling a trembling boy by the arm as defenders behind you brace themselves on the edge of the roof for another desperate stand. "Move!" a marine shouts. "Get the civilians off this roof, now!" You help a woman climb onto a narrow ridge connecting 2 buildings. Her hands shake so violently that you grab her wrists and steady them, guiding her across. Smoke stings your eyes, carried by swirling winds that sweep through the burning city. Sparks drift upward, floating like fireflies across the night sky. Below, Thessaloniki collapses into chaos. Colliding screams, shattering pottery, collapsing beams, Norman horns echoing through choked alleys. You step onto the next rooftop and look back. The defenders form a jagged line along the edge of the basilica roof. They fight like cornered lions, slashing downward at Norman climbers, kicking attackers back, hurling loose tiles like stones. One marine tackles a Norman who has just scrambled onto the roof, both rolling dangerously close to the edge. They grapple for a heartbeat before the Norman slips, falling to the street below in a horrible clatter. For 1 second, the defenders actually push the attackers back. Then a Norman archer appears on the opposite building. He draws, releases. The arrow strikes the marine in the ribcage. He stumbles, eyes going wide with shock, then collapses backward. Another arrow lands, then another. The rooftop defense fractures instantly. You hear a defender shout, fall back to the workshops." You feel a lump rise in your throat. The rooftop is no longer safe. The basilica is gone. The streets are crawling with enemies. Thessaloniki has become a sinking ship, and you're running across what's left of its deck. You help 2 remaining civilians down a broken stairway into a workshop courtyard. The smell of burning wood presses down on you like a wet cloth. Somewhere close by, a roof caves in with a roar, sending sparks scattering over the surrounding homes. A cat darts past your legs, fur smoking, screeching as it flees into the night. "Here!" a defender calls, waving you into a carpentry shop lit only by the glow of distant flames. "Block the doors." You shove a heavy table against the frame, followed by a stack of wooden planks. Others drag saw benches and storage chests. The workshop becomes a makeshift fortress, smelling of pine resin, sawdust, sweat, and fear. A child coughs beside you. You kneel. "Stay low," you whisper. "Cover your mouth with your sleeve." He nods silently. The defenders gather near the doorway, spears and swords ready. Through the cracks in the shutters you see shadows moving, Normans searching. Their heavy boots stomp along the alley outside. Their voices drift through the broken air. "We wait here?" one defender asks. "For now," another says. You sit beside the wall and try to steady your heartbeat. Your hands tremble uncontrollably. Sweat mixes with grime until every inch of your skin feels coated in dust and soot. Then, a scream. Close. Too close. You peek through the crack. A Norman soldier drags a shopkeeper into the alley. The man struggles, but the Norman strikes him with the flat of his blade and hauls him away. Another Norman kicks open a door across the street. Your stomach twists. Thessaloniki is being emptied house by house. A defender mutters, "Savages," but you know better. These aren't savages, they're professional predators. Suddenly, the workshop door rattles violently. "They found us," someone shouts. Another blow shakes the planks. A Norman growls something guttural. The shutters splinter as 2 axes smash through them. "Defend!" the sergeant roars. The door cracks. A spear thrusts through the gap. You shove your shoulder into the table, pressing with all your strength. A defender to your left does the same. The civilians cower behind a rack of carpentry tools. The Normans push harder. The table shifts. Another axe crashes through the shutter. Light spills in. A Norman eye appears in the gap, cold, determined. You ram your spear through it. He screams, falls back. The defenders cheer, but the cheers die instantly, because more boots pound outside 3, 5, 10 steps. There are dozens now. "Back door," someone yells. You rush toward the workshop's rear exit, but it's barred. You fumble with the latch, but it's stuck, swollen from heat. A defender tries to help. Together, you shove. It opens halfway before catching again. Then the front door explodes inward. Tables topple, planks scatter. A Norman barges through the opening, shield raised. Another follows, then another. You stab wildly, catching one in the shoulder. A defender beside you takes down another, but the third slams his shield into your ribs, knocking the wind out of you. You stumble back into a rack of chisels. Wooden shelves collapse behind you. "This way!" a defender shouts, pulling you toward the half-open rear door. You dive through, dragging a civilian with you. Others follow, squeezing through as Normans flood the workshop. You spill out into a narrow back alley, dark, smoky, lit only by fire-gritted moonlight. You run. Feet slip on wet stone. The air burns your lungs. Behind you, Normans crash through the rear door. "They're coming," someone cries. You sprint down the alley, turning sharply into another lane lined with hanging laundry, now smouldering from drifting embers. A burning cloth falls behind you like a curtain. You keep running, gasping, guiding the civilians deeper into the maze of back streets, but there's no destination, only a way, only not here. You reach a small courtyard, a well in the centre, a circle of abandoned homes around it. For a moment it's quiet, almost peaceful. A defender leans against the well, catching his breath. "We can rest here, just for a moment." But you shake your head. No, because in the distance you hear horns again. 3 blasts, then 2, then 1, a chilling pattern. The defender's face pales. That signal. It's a call to regroup. They're organising. And you realise something terrifying. The Normans aren't just raiding anymore. They're coordinating the next push. A larger one. A final sweep. The city is nearly theirs, and every survivor in these backstreets, including you, is about to be hunted down. Thessaloniki is no longer a city. It is prey. And the wolves have found the scent. You don't notice the exact moment when Thessaloniki stops being a besieged city and turns into a plundered one. There's no line, no bell, no announcement reading. Congratulations, your civilization has collapsed. It just happens. One street at a time, one house at a time, one scream at a time. You crouch in the shadow of a narrow overhang with a handful of exhausted defenders and a few civilians you've collected along the way. An old woman clutching a rosary, a boy with soot-streaked cheeks, a carpenter still gripping a hammer like it's a sacred relic. The air tastes of smoke and fear. Flames lick the sky not far off, painting the clouds the colour of bruised oranges. And then you hear it. Not battle, not organised assault. Something worse. Laughter, breaking wood, shouted orders with no discipline in them anymore. The sounds of victory unchained Normans pour through the streets around you, no longer marching in tight formation, no longer timing their steps to drums. Now they move in smaller bands, harvesting whatever spoils the city has left to offer. Some drag carts, already piled high with cloth, bronze, silver, and anything that shines. Others kick open doors like it's a sport. One man carries 3 icons under his arm and a golden chalice in his fist, grinning like he's just won a very violent lottery. You shift deeper into the shadow as a group passes by. A Norman stops, sniffing the air like a dog. "Wine," he says in his own tongue. He kicks in a cellar door. Shouts of protest erupt. You hear the ugly thud of someone being struck, a broken jug crashing, liquid splashing across stone. The boy next to you flinches. You put a hand on his shoulder. "Don't look," you whisper. Because this isn't fighting anymore. This is feeding. As darkness fully settles, the city glows from within. Dozens of fires lighting alleys and courtyards, torchlight flickering in windows where Normans have taken over. You move carefully between buildings, guiding your little cluster of survivors toward any corner not yet claimed by flame or steel. You pass a once bustling marketplace, now unrecognizable, stalls overturned. Goods scattered, a pile of grain smoulders in the centre, ruined and useless. A dead mule lies on its side, harness still attached, eyes glazed. A Norman sits casually on a fallen pillar, counting coins in the firelight. A defender beside you grinds his teeth. "They're not just taking," he mutters, "they're breaking what they can't carry." It's true. You see smashed jars of oil soaking into the dirt, torn tapestries hanging half-burned from balconies, fountains clogged with broken statues. The Normans don't just want Thessaloniki's wealth. They want to make sure no one else ever enjoys what they leave behind. At the edge of the market, a group of Normans hauls barrels from a warehouse. One pries a lid open, sniffs, and grins. "Wine," he says. Another pops his own, sniffs, and grimaces. "Vinegar." He kicks the barrel over, letting it spill onto the floor. Subtle review system. 5 stars for wine, 1 star for vinegar. You slip through a side street lined with workshops. The doors hang open, tools scattered, owners gone. A goldsmith shop stands half-ruined, its display shelves empty. But on the floor, you catch glints of tiny gold beads, their size too small to interest looters who are thinking in chests, not handfuls. The old woman with you kneels and brushes her fingers over them, whispering, "Years of work, gone in an afternoon." You help her up gently ahead, you hear music. Not the good kind. Normans are singing. Rowdy, off-key, drunk already on stolen wine and victory. Their voices bounce off the stone walls, oddly cheerful against the backdrop of burning roofs. You peek around a corner. They've taken over a large townhouse. Doors ripped off hinges, curtains torn down, furniture tossed into the courtyard to make room for a crude feast. They pass bread, meat, and pitchers of wine among themselves. A set of fine silver dishes sits on the ground, now used as makeshift platters for greasy food. A defender beside you whispers bitterly, "Nobles feast here last week. Normans feast here tonight. Different lords, same table." You pull back before anyone spots you. Everywhere you go, the pattern repeats. Church doors smashed, altars stripped, icons taken, gold leaf scraped from ceilings. You see one Norman standing atop a pile of broken pews, pointing at a mosaic and laughing with his comrades. Another scales a balcony to rip down a hanging brass lamp. In one home, the entire contents of a chest are spilled across the floor, bolts of silk, jewellery, documents, family keepsakes, while Normans pick through like children in a toy chest, taking only what sparkles brightest. They're not here to govern. They're here to gorge. And Thessaloniki, fat and gleaming only days before, is now a carcass. You pass the harbour and stop. What was once a bustling gateway of trade now looks like a ship graveyard wrapped in chaos. Norman guards control the docks, directing carts piled with loot toward waiting ships. You see sacks of grain, bundles of cloth, crates of pottery, barrels of oil. Anything portable is being hauled aboard. A noble's gilded chest goes up a gangplank surrounded by 4 men like it's a holy relic. A sailor laughs and pats it. By the time we reach home, he boasts, I'll be drinking out of gold. You wonder, grimly, if the noble who once owned that chest is even alive to be angry about it. To one side, a Greek merchant argues desperately with a Norman over a small crate. "Those are my records," he cries. "My contracts, my books." The Norman shrugs, picks the crate up anyway, and tosses it onto a ship. Paper flutters out, scattering across the water like broken wings. The merchant falls to his knees, staring after them as if watching his life drift away. A defender beside you murmurs, "They're not just taking things, they're taking futures." You retreat from the harbour, slipping deeper into the residential streets. The fires are worse here now. Roofs sag, beams collapse. A dog barks madly at a group of passing Normans until one kicks it aside. The night air feels thick, smoky, and hot, as if the city itself is running a fever. At one corner, you find a group of locals huddled inside a half-collapsed courtyard. They look up with hollow eyes when you approach. "Is it over?" a man asks. You hesitate. "The fighting? Mostly. The rest? Not yet." A woman next to him shakes her head. "I'd rather die in battle than live to watch them tear this city apart." The scarred soldier from earlier, leaning on his spear, answers quietly, "If you're alive, the city still exists. Stones can be rebuilt. People can't." She considers that. Maybe survival is its own kind of defiance. As the night drags toward dawn, the Normans don't slow. If anything, their frenzy sharpens. They've ripped the city open and now clawed deeper into whatever's left. Storehouses, treasuries, wealthy homes, even modest workshops that might hide a silver cup or a hoarded coin. You watch them drag out a chest from a tax collector's villa. They crack it open. Silver spills inside. One Norman whistles. "This city was rich," he says. You whisper back under your breath. Past tense. Because what once made Thessaloniki shine, its merchants, its trade, its markets, its treasures, is now being shoveled into carts and carried toward ships, one plundered piece at a time. At last, exhausted, you find temporary refuge in a small, smoke-stained chapel off a narrow lane. A few survivors cluster there. Too poor to have drawn much attention, too small to be worth looting. You sink against the wall, every muscle burning, ears still full of distant shouts and clatter. Outside, the city that was once Byzantium's proud second jewel crackles, smoulders and whimpers through the final hours of its sacking. Thessaloniki has not just fallen, it's been emptied, and when the Normans finally leave, ships heavy with stolen wealth, what remains behind will be more than ruins. It will be a memory of walls that cracked, of leaders who failed, of people who endured, and of a night when the second city of the empire learned what happens when ambition from across the sea meets weakness at home. Dawn creeps over Thessaloniki slowly, as if even the sun is reluctant to witness what remains. Pale light slips between drifting columns of smoke, illuminating streets that look more like the aftermath of an earthquake than the work of human hands. You step out of the cramped chapel where you and a handful of survivors hid through the night. Your legs ache, your throat burns, your clothes smell like ash and fear, but you're alive, which already puts you ahead of many. The defenders, what's left of them, gather in the narrow lane outside. Their armour is dented, stained, barely hanging together. Cuts streak their faces, bandages wrap arms and legs. Some limp, some lean on spears like crutches. In the early light, they look less like soldiers and more like ghosts who haven't realised they died. A marine squints up the smoke-filled street. "The Normans quieted down," he murmurs. "No more shouting, no more horns." "Is it over?" the boy from earlier whispers. You exhale. "No, but the worst of it passed while we hid." A defender wipes soot from his forehead. "If this is the worst, I don't want to see the rest." You push forward slowly, guiding your small group toward the city centre. The ground crunches with broken pottery and charred beams. Every step sends thin dust clouds swirling around your boots. The air still tastes burnt. You pass a collapsed awning, its fabric turned to black lace. Beyond it, a workshop lies gutted, tools scattered across the floor, an anvil gleaming amid the ashes like a survivor refusing to surrender. You hear faint sobbing. You round a corner to find an old man kneeling in front of what used to be his home. It is now a skeletal frame, the upper level charred, the door missing, the roof collapsed inward. He turns to you, eyes hollow. "They left nothing," he says. "Not a single thing." You rest a hand on his shoulder. It's not comfort, it's simply presence. Sometimes that's all there is. The closer you get to the city's heart, the more chaotic the scene becomes. The Forum, where you made your desperate stand hours ago, is unrecognizable. Blackened stone, shattered columns, burned debris. The marketplace stalls are flattened. The fountain lies cracked, water mixing with ash until it forms grey puddles on the ground. Scorch marks climb the basilica's walls like dark veins. The doors hang from their hinges, warped and splintered. Normans wander among the ruins in loose groups, talking quietly or carrying bundles. They look tired now, not just physically, but mentally. The thrill of plunder has worn off, replaced by the dull afterglow of violence. You watch them from a distance, careful, staying in the shadows of broken buildings. One soldier dumps a handful of jewellery into a sack. Another drags a tapestry across the Forum. A third sharpens his sword, flicking dust from his gauntlets. Their commanders shout orders in the distance. You catch fragments. Bring everything. To the harbour. No delays. They're preparing to leave. The city has been picked clean enough. A strange thought comes to you. Even predators know when the carcass has nothing left to give. You continue past the Forum, stepping around debris and bodies. Some defenders fell where they fought. Some civilians lie where they tried to flee. You force your eyes not to linger. The boy behind you tries to look but winces, burying his face in his sleeve. The scarred soldier walks beside you, voice low. "We should count ourselves lucky. We saw the worst of it and survived." He pauses. Most didn't. You nod, but the guilt sits heavy in your stomach. Ahead, you find a small group of survivors, women, children, elderly men, sitting in a circle near a broken column. They clutch blankets and makeshift bandages. A priest hands out pieces of bread someone found in a nearby storeroom. They flinch whenever a Norman walks by. A woman looks up as you approach. "Is there anywhere safe?" she asks. You look around. Burned homes, collapsed roofs, looted markets, Normans loading carts. Safe? Not yet, but maybe soon. "We'll find somewhere," you say gently. A loud shout echoes from the harbour. You and the defenders rush toward the sound, weaving through alleys littered with ash and shattered pottery. When you reach the docks, you see the Normans loading their loot onto ships, massive piles of treasure, grain, cloth, metalwork, icons, even furniture. Cart after cart rolls down the ramps. Chests clatter, barrels thud. Normans laugh. The scent of the sea finally cuts through the smoke, a strange reminder that the world outside Thessaloniki is still turning. A defender mutters, "They're leaving with half the city." "No," you correct softly, "with the half that can fit in chests." They've taken the tangible things, wealth, gold, goods, but what they've truly stolen is time. It will take decades for Thessaloniki to recover, if it ever does. A group of Norman officers gather near the command ship, speaking in hushed tones. One gestures toward the city. Another laughs. You can't hear the words, but you understand the meaning. They've done what they came for. The plunder is complete, and like all raiders, once the spoils are stored, they grow eager to sail home. The ship's crews begin coiling ropes, rigging sails, calling orders. One ship already pushes off, drifting from the dock like a great wooden beast weighted with stolen treasure. You watch it go, feeling something unexpected. Relief, not justice. Not satisfaction, just relief that the storm is moving on. Once the Normans begin withdrawing their units from the streets, some civilians creep out of hiding for the first time. A woman emerges from beneath a collapsed balcony. A group of children step from a burned doorway. A priest leads a handful of elderly men toward the Forum. They look stunned, blinking against the light, as if emerging from a long nightmare. You guide your survivors toward a central square where others gather. The city feels fragile now, like a cracked jar barely holding together. People whisper, "Is it really over? Where are the soldiers? Is the governor alive? Who will help us?" For once, you have no answer. But slowly, very slowly, life inches back into the streets. Women wrap wounds, children fetch water, men lift debris. The first flicker of rebuilding sparks in small actions. Thessaloniki breathes, a weak, trembling breath, but a breath. You look once more toward the harbour. The last Norman ships prepare to sail. The city burns behind you. The sun rises ahead, and though Thessaloniki lies broken, gutted, stripped, it still stands, barely, and you somehow stand with it. But the night's horrors cling to the edges of your thoughts like soot you can't wash away. Tomorrow will bring grief, repair, uncertainty. But tonight is ending, and the survivors are still here. A small miracle in a city that nearly vanished. The Normans' departure does not feel like victory. It feels like a fever breaking, leaving the body trembling, drenched in sweat, unsure if it will survive the morning. You stand on the charred stones of the harbour district, watching the last of the Norman ships push slowly into the Aegean, their sails catching the soft dawn wind. The water ripples gold and pink beneath them, beautiful in a way that feels almost offensive given what those ships carry. The wealth of a city, the memories of thousands of families, the pride of an entire region. As the final vessel shrinks toward the horizon, a hush settles over the survivors gathered along the ruined docks. For one fragile moment, Thessaloniki is silent. No screaming, no crashing, no chanting soldiers, only the distant cry of gulls circling above the masts. A defender beside you exhales shakily. So, this is it. But no one cheers, no one raises a fist, no one claims triumph, because the Normans didn't lose. They simply finished. You turn away from the sea and walk slowly through the battered harbour district. Smoke still drifts from collapsed roofs. The air smells like wet ash and burnt grain. The streets crunch beneath your boots. Broken pottery, charred wood, shattered glass. You step over a collapsed awning and see a woman sweeping the entrance to what used to be her bakery. The door is gone. The shelves overturned. But she sweeps anyway, each motion a stubborn declaration. I'm still here. Further up the lane, men gather around a fallen cart, righting it with groans and effort. A child pulls a cat from beneath a burned stairwell. The animal trembles violently, but it's alive. A priest distributes salvaged bread. A girl kneels beside a mosaic of St. Demetrios, brushing away soot with her sleeve. Broken doesn't mean dead. Ruined doesn't mean finished. But Thessaloniki is changed. You can feel it in every breath. The Forum, once the city's beating heart, now lies exposed to the sky. The stone floor is cracked and blackened. A single pillar leans at a strange, unnatural angle like a man who barely survived a beating. You walk through the ruins, guiding survivors to an open space where others begin to gather. Some weep. Some mutter prayers. Some sit silently, staring at nothing. The scarred soldier, the one who fought beside you on the walls, in the alleys, on the roofs, steps to your side. His armour is in tatters. His hands tremble. "We'll rebuild," he says softly. You look at him. "You think so?" He shrugs. "We're still breathing. That's the beginning." He's right. Survival is its own foundation. Nearby, a young boy tugs at your sleeve. Are they coming back?" You kneel beside him. "No," you say gently. "Not today, not soon." His eyes soften with exhausted relief. A bell begins to ring, cracked, uneven, wobbling off key. But ringing, calling the living to gather, a priest limps into the square, holding a soot-smeared icon. His voice croaks hoarsely. "Come together. We count the living. We care for the wounded. Thessaloniki stands by God's mercy." People drift toward the sound, slow and limping. You join them. The city looks like a ghost wearing its own skin, patches burned, pieces missing. But within those ruins, life flickers. Small, stubborn, defiantly ordinary. A woman distributes water. A man begins to rebuild a stall with trembling hands. Children gather broken tiles, stacking them like building blocks. The great basilica still stands, scarred, violated, half-burned, but its stones have not given way. When you look at it, you feel something strange and unfamiliar. Not hope, not pride, something quieter, something like endurance. You take a slow breath. Smoke fills your lungs. But beneath it, beneath the ruin and dust, you taste salt from the sea. The Normans have gone. Thessaloniki remains, and you, bruised, exhausted, soot-covered, remain with it. Not a hero, not a warrior, just someone who refused to fall. And sometimes that's enough. The wind softens as morning settles over the broken city, carrying with it the faintest coolness from the sea. You step away from the gathering crowd, your body tired in a way that feels deeper than muscle, quieter than pain. The stones beneath your feet are warm, touched by the newborn sun, and as you walk you find yourself moving more slowly, each step a gentle drift rather than a march. The sounds of rebuilding echo faintly across the district. Soft voices, the clink of tools, the low hum of people, reminding themselves that life continues. These sounds don't demand anything from you. They simply fill the air, soothing and steady like waves brushing the shore. You find a small corner where the walls still stand. Half-shadowed and calm, you sink down against the warm stone, letting your shoulders relax, letting your breath even out into long, slow exhales. The light glows golden on the dust in the air, turning it from ash into something softer, almost peaceful. You close your eyes. For the first time since the siege began, your heartbeat stops racing. The distant noise of the city becomes a gentle murmur. Even the memory of the horns seems to fade beneath the breeze. In this quiet moment, the worries that chased you through the streets loosen their grip. The fear softens, thinning into something light enough to drift away. You feel your body becoming heavier, grounding itself, settling. Thessaloniki has endured fire, steel, and shadow, and so have you. Let the breath ease out. Let the muscles loosen. Let the world dim into soft edges. You are safe now. The night has passed, and in the quiet warmth of this new morning you can finally rest. Good night. Sweet dreams.